Uh, I think
Yep.
something wrong with the intro.
Yep.
Okay.
For
Never
some
mind.
reason, right? For some
We are
reason, something
live.
wrong with the intro.
Are we live? We are live.
We are live.
Let's
Wow,
go.
what an eventful night, right? All right, guys, welcome back to the Three Marketeers Show. This is episode 70. You know, it's like Jinx a little bit have to do some whatever, right? You have some interesting situation at the back. You know,
Yeah,
at
man.
first Andrew couldn't come in, and then Manfred's line got like frozen here and there, and eventually the intro cannot play. Manfred, blame you lah. The intro cannot play. So, all right, guys, welcome back to the Three Marketer Show. This is episode 70, and we have a very interesting guest, Wesley from, the public relations industry. That's why we're going to learn a lot from him tonight. But if you guys are joining us for the first time, remember we do this every Wednesday night. And if you like what we do, remember to invite your friends to join us every Wednesday night. Every week, we have some guests to come in to share with us very interesting insights from different industries. You know, most of them are actually from digital marketing, but sometimes we will spend over to actually cover some different topics as well. So if you have any guesses that you believe should be in our show, please do refer, and we will definitely be happy to feature them. Right? So
Just message me.
just message Manfred. Manfred is our chief guest
Manfred
coordinator.
is what we call our showrunner.
Oh yeah, I mean
He's
he's
our
the guy who
showrunner.
actually keep the show running, right? It's not that easy.
Yes.
So tonight we have Wes, and Wes is actually Manfred's guest. Manfred, you want to help us intro Wesley a little bit so that we know?
Let me take over from here.
Please
Hope that
do.
my internet don't break again. Okay. Actually, I met Wesley through Niza. Niza was here a few weeks back for the
2 weeks ago.
Google Analytics program.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Show. So you can check him out for Google Analytics. He's supposed to come back for another one for Google Data Studio. We're trying to arrange on that. So
Yes.
when we talk about PR, every time you look for jobs, you will notice that the digital marketing, then something digital marketing / PR. For my case, I'll skip the job because I cannot do PR. Okay, I came from corporate comms background, so I roughly know PR. So if you want to find out more about PR, Wesley is the right person to find out more. So Wesley, you take over from here.
So Wesley,
Thank
please
you
share
so
with us
much.
about yourself, please. Thank
Okay,
you so
sure.
much for joining us.
Thanks, Manfred, for the intro, and it's a pleasure to be on this show. I love talking about marketing trends, especially in PR, because not many people seem to understand it. So,
Yes.
just a bit about myself. I run a PR agency in Singapore. It's called Right Hook Communications. It's been around for 9 years.
Wow.
What I do in a nutshell is basically I get publicity for my clients in the mainstream media, as well as with influencers as well, right? Like you see all those influencers that go online on YouTube and do stuff like that. Yeah. So I'm the middleman basically between the client and these media channels.
Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. Like what Manfred was saying, right? You know, the PR is kind of like mystery to a lot of people. To be frank, like although we are marketers or so-called digital marketers, but in a way, every time it comes to PR, it seems to be something that we can't really like kind of like grasp. So I think it would be very interesting that we can actually try to learn more from you,
Yeah.
Wesley. But then again, let's see who else. Who are we having on the chat right now? We have
Who do we
What's
have?
here?
Marketer Show. Chiwa is saying no intro music today. Yeah, seriously, something wrong with the system and all that. You know, some crazy interesting jinx because of the crossing over from 6 crossing over to 7. You know, it's like a magic number. So we have to have some situations over here. So, all right. Okay, that's.
I got a question for Wesley.
Please
If
do.
you don't mind. I'm going to jump
Sure,
in.
Andrew.
You mentioned that influencers also look for PR. I mean, in what area? Maybe I'm just jumping the gun, but it's just curious. In what area would they? Aren't they already publicizing themselves by whatever they do?
Well, there are ways where we work with influencers. One of them is how we work in terms of a barter trade agreement with influencers for our clients.
Oh.
So, for example, if a client wants their brand to be seen in a certain niche market, right? So we will identify certain influencers that would capture that market, such as parent bloggers, for example, right? And we will either invite them down for events, or we'll give them products to try, and they'll do either a post on their Instagram or write an article about it. That is our relationship with bloggers, influencers.
Ah, so
Yeah,
you're basically treating them as another media outlet, a media
that's right.
channel. I see. Okay,
That's right.
understood. I
Okay.
thought it was influencers who needed PR assistance. I was like, okay,
Actually, could be what?
However,
Yeah.
I've had queries on that
right.
recently, right? Because some of them they want to better be able to promote themselves on social media channels as well as how to present themselves. So I have had requests in terms of how can a PR agency grow their profile on mainstream news, which is quite
Ah,
interesting, right? Because you're
right.
flipping
Yeah.
it now. Yeah, yeah.
It's kind of like
Okay.
Trying to
crossing
engage.
over already,
That's right. Yeah,
influencer.
it's
Yeah,
crossing boundaries. Yeah.
I
that's
see.
very
Okay,
interesting. That's very
understood.
interesting. So,
How
guys,
does
if
that
you
work? Just can share.
yeah,
How does that work? Okay, it's the same as how a CEO, for example, of a company wants to be seen and heard on more channels, right?
Hmm.
So if a CEO wants to brand themselves as a thought leader, so I think that the term influencer has received quite a number of negative connotations over the past few years lah. There's
Yeah.
been backlash because I think especially in countries like the States and all that, influencers have been seen as a kind of a pest in some sense because they like to ask for free stuff. So the right term now, I think PR people, PR folks tend to use are key opinion leaders,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
KOLs
Mm.
or thought leaders, right?
Yep.
So as a thought leader, if you're an influencer, okay, let's use the word KOL, right? If you're a KOL and supposing that you're a fashion guru or you're a fitness enthusiast or something, how do they want to be seen in the public light, right? So that they would get more business, more clients. So if you look at how they can do that, I mean, in terms of mainstream media, maybe they have an interesting hobby, maybe they have a interesting business on the side, and this can be picked up by the mainstream news in certain segments. So that's how these influencers would drive more attention to themselves in the mainstream news.
I see.
right. So it's still something. I mean, PR is in a way, it's kind of like how do you position yourself, and there must be some motive at the back of it, usually, right? Because you want to gain something in a way. That's the reason why you want
Exposure,
to
lah.
do
I think the keyword is
exposure.
exposure. Yeah.
That's right. I think a public image, exposure, and now I think it's measured in likes and the data and analytics to measure this, which later on I'll talk about now.
I
Yeah,
see.
Cool.
but that
Awesome.
yeah, you've hit the nail on the head, basically. It's all about public image and publicity and awareness. Yeah.
Awesome. All
Awesome.
right.
Awesome. That's a very interesting start. So guys, if you have any questions regarding PR, like you have some PR crisis or PR situations that you're facing, who is the person that you can talk to, right? By the way, if you guys want to connect with Wesley, I've already put it up, the link over here that you can connect with him on LinkedIn. And if you want to find out more, seriously, I was just talking to him, right? 18 years in the industry, damn crazy veteran.
Right.
It's not just talking about somebody else who just jump in, right? This is really damn solid, and you need his connection at the times. Okay, so now I just want to quickly reel in with our first question. I'm just going to bring this in now, just to help really the so-called people like me, seriously no clue about PR, and for beginners, any beginners out there, just to help us understand what exactly is PR, as in public relations, and why do we need it? In what situation? Like you mentioned just now, KOL may need it.
Yeah.
Business CEO may need it, businesses need it definitely, but how can normal businesses or person relate this?
So that's a great start because I want to just share with you some interesting anecdotes when I first joined this industry. When I used to tell people I'm in PR, the first thing that came to mind, oh, you work in a nightclub, right? Like, do you do PR? So I was like, what? No. The second thing was, do I work for immigration, ICA? Like, do I chop passports?
Permanent
So
residency.
so I think this opened up the doors for a lot of discussions in terms of what I do. And even when I used to explain what I did, they
Right.
still had a confused look on their face, right? They just didn't want to probe further because I think they didn't want to look stupid. But
Yeah.
but basically, in a nutshell, public relations, as what I mentioned earlier, is getting publicity for clients through relationships. It's not paid for, right? So it's like, for example, it's by word of mouth, right? I mean, it's a matter of creating relationships with various components. I mean, it's not just media. Media is one component, but you have your stakeholders, you have it can be in some places, government agencies, It can be external publics. So the general term is external publics. And how does a PR practitioner maintain that relationship to basically maintain a positive public image of the brand and the company?
Yep.
So that in a nutshell is public relations. And why do we need it? Well, everyone needs to have a good reputation. I think that even for personal branding yourself, right, you have to dress a certain way. You have to shave, you have to groom yourself so that, people will see you in a certain light, right? Otherwise, how are you going to get that job interview? How are you going to get a girlfriend, right? Or a boyfriend? So it's the same way as how companies need to have a certain image of themselves, right? They need to portray that image in the right way, whether, in terms of their messages, what they do and what they say have to be in line with what is going on. So for example, if you are a health restaurant or something like that, and on your menu you serve something which is unhealthy, that doesn't tally with your brand. Or if you are a gym, right, and your instructors are seen smoking outside, so that actually changes the public perception of the brand. So that is why public relations is very important for brands.
Right.
So one question. So
Yeah.
normally when people ask me about PR, I always thought that when you talk about marketing means like, say example, you pay Google AdWords or Facebook Ads Manager to pay to get some visibility. About
Yeah.
PR is really, the newspaper, CNBC, BBC, through relationship,
Yes.
you get your CEO to be visible on national TV or something like that.
Yes.
Then
That
comes to
is
one question. One
Yeah.
question. Does corporate communication equivalent to PR?
That's a good
Actually,
question.
it is.
That's a good
It
one.
is. Corporate communications. Why it's called corporate communications? It's because it's very process driven,
Hmm.
and it's very closely related to the government sector.
Hmm.
So whenever you work in a role like maybe Ministry of Foreign Affairs or in a government job, normally the position is called comms person, right?
Okay.
Affairs, etc. Because you are maintaining the corporate image of the company
Hmm.
through their interviews, through what they say to the press, right?
Hmm.
So it is public relations.
Hmm.
Yes, to answer your question.
Okay.
Mm.
So I would say, I mean, just want to quickly angle another question in, just really like, I mean, you're saying that PR is in a way, how do you maintain a certain set of image, or so-called how you portray,
Mhm.
how you make people understand like you as if a brand is a person, in terms of the tonality, in terms of the personality. Is that so? So I mean,
Actually,
yeah, please.
yes. So how I sell to my clients basically that image, right? There are different ways. One is through different story angles. So for example, it can be brand A, and we want to basically get them more awareness in the press. But of course, the awareness needs to be positive awareness, right? But there are different components how you tell these stories to the press. So think of PR people as storytellers, right? We tell many different stories to media channels, right? And you can't tell the same story to each media channel because if you tell the same story,
Must be
sometimes it
new
won't click with
webinars.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I have to tell a story to Business Times, for example, right, for a client of mine, it has to be more finance related. I have to give them more numbers. I have to talk about expansion, growth, etc. If I pitch a story to, a lifestyle publication like Straits Times Life or CNA Lifestyle or something, there has to be angle about, what makes their brand so hip, so fashionable, what are they doing, why people are talking about it, or maybe their CEO is someone that likes to do extreme sports or something like that, from a personality point of view. So there are many ways to tell a story, and it's to just to ensure that the story hits the right people at the right time. So you need to be basically quite eloquent at coming up with various angles for just one client alone.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah,
mean, as we can see, this is really not an easy job.
it's
You
not.
must
No.
be able to look at things like beyond them, like if you
Yep.
want to
Mm,
talk about promoting a brand, you need to put together a lot of different pieces together. Like even you want to put in the CEO, even maybe you want to position some of the, like employees to become a hero or something to talk about, to actually amplify a part of a story. Uh, I think that kind of helped me understand, that really helps in terms of,
Yep.
now I understand PR better. But okay, my another question would be,
mm.
is paid advertising part of PR plan usually?
No,
No.
no. Paid advertising is separate from PR. Now, the confusion lies with certain articles and certain things called an advertorial, right?
Yep.
where sometimes you open a newspaper and at the top of the page it says advertorial, right? Or paid for sponsorship or something. So that is basically paid for by the client for the newspaper to write that story for them. So they can basically dictate to the newspaper what to say and what to write because that whole section is paid, which is different from in the sense that if you read an article about a brand, like for example, this hotel has had a new kind of eco-friendly kind of eco-friendly kind of aircon or something. That is PR because they are actually reporting on news, right? And something new that is relevant to their target market. So how does it get into the papers? It's through pitching. It's through basically making sure that the journalist is equipped with enough information so that they write the story. And it's not necessary that the whole story will be about the client itself. It could be a trend story featuring many different hotels with the same technology, right? But that actually creates more credibility for the brand because it's not paid for.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Now I get
It's
better.
so much difficult. No? Then it really
It's
depends
not
on the
easy.
relationship with the media. No? Whether
That's right.
you,
Your relationship is king. That's why
Yeah.
you have to wine and dine journalists. You have to be nice to them, and you have to give them, most importantly, what they want at the right time.
Hmm.
Wow.
I used to work with a newspaper organization when I actually started work. And at one
Okay.
point, we were doing, I was responsible to pitch for those prospectus ads for IPOs and all those things.
Oh,
And
wow.
sometimes you
Okay.
see, so sometimes you see, new CEOs who got their company listed and all those things. But these are
Mm,
so-called the smaller ones, so they don't have corporate communications and all those things. Generally, these are the guys who build the company from scratch, and all they do
mm,
is just do business. They don't care about PR, they don't care
yeah,
about marketing. But
yeah,
now they want to IPO it because they want to pass it to their kids and all those things. So um, so some of them didn't want to engage PR. When we talk about you should get a
mm,
PR and all those things, that's why I said to tell no story to tell, but you're IPOing your company. So I ended up so-called helping them to a certain extent, and I'm just a sales guy. So, but
mm,
we connected. I connected with the business, editors of the newspaper and all those things, and even TV stations. And you're right. We don't. I don't wine and dine, but primarily I pitch them based on basically what sort of news that's relevant. So that's how I learned about PR. Because when I talk to the editors, they will grill me and says, "Okay, tell me why should I feature this story?" And
mm.
then I've got to go back to the client and
news
says, "Okay, now
anchor.
you want to talk to these people, you must explain this and all the stuff, and this is your story and all these things." So that was my exposure to PR. So my next question to you, which is a kind of a loaded one, is
Mhm.
PR manufactured or is PR a refinement of the actual story?
I
That's a good
love
one.
that question. I love
That's a
that
good one.
question. Okay, to answer this question, let me bring you back to history, okay?
Whoa.
And okay,
Awesome.
Let's
so
do.
so the
Awesome.
the the basics of PR actually go way back, right? What you see now with digital marketing and all that, publicity, influencer marketing, and recently, if you've been reading about Google, how people have been saying they've been unintentionally been influenced through targeted ads, to in a way through voting, through buying certain products. This is PR actually, because if you look at the roots of PR, it was started by this person who's named as the father of PR, Edward Louis Bernays, right, from the US in the 1920s. Now, if you think about how American breakfast came into view, right, this big American breakfast, it was all a manufactured kind of campaign. It was not
Mm,
because people suddenly started thinking, oh, let's go and eat a big breakfast now with some eggs and sausages. No, because at that point of time, the 1920s, there were a lot of people that were not very wealthy. They were eating very small breakfasts. And the bigger companies like the meat companies were losing money because people weren't buying their products, right? Especially pork companies.
right.
So they hired this guy, right? This Mr. Bernays, right? To sell this idea that a big breakfast is going to give you energy for the rest of the day. It's going to keep you up. And then he even went that extra mile by speaking to medical companies, doctors. They started writing reports about the advantages of having a healthy breakfast with meat, etc. And this eventually went into the minds of people. So it's a slow burn, you see. But if you look at the results today, it stayed in the minds of the public for ages.
Yeah,
Which is
man.
why I say PR is such an effective tool and it's so powerful, but people don't seem to realize how to utilize it. You know, uh, you can basically influence minds, through voting, you know, through even pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies use PR on a grand scale because they can't use advertising, right? They cannot have their products featured because it's against the law. So how
Yeah.
do they influence people to buy their products? It's through PR, it's through soft sell, selling stories to people through medias, interviewing certain things. And that's how it kind of is slowly sold into the minds of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to
Right.
answer
Not
your
easy,
question,
no. It's not easy.
yeah,
Man.
it's not easy. It's a slow process. But Andrew, to answer your question, I would say manufactured is quite a strong term to use, but I would say that it is a soft sell approach, right?
Mm.
It is like, I always think about this old childhood story about basically the man with the coat, right? And the wind tried to blow his coat away and he kept holding on to the coat, right? And no matter how hard the wind blew at his coat, he still didn't take it off. He still held on more tightly. And then the sun came and said, okay, I bet you I can take off his coat. So the sun came out in its glory and shone its light, and the guy took off his coat. So you have to make sure that the buyer is willing to buy your product instead of shoving things in his face. Yeah.
Mm.
So
It's
that's PR.
yeah, one of the famous campaign is the beers Diamond is Forever, and also the God
Aha.
Milk campaign.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
That's the one. Yeah. The God Milk
Well,
campaign. I love that campaign. Yeah.
Yes.
so it's a very interesting concept about, like now we understand it's a lot more about engineering a lot of so-called, of course it has to be selling something that is the right thing to sell that people wants to buy. But then again, you are not like shoving in their face. It's just like trying
Yes.
to actually build a journey to make them believe instead of you selling, they sell it to themselves in a way.
That's right. Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. It's
Mm.
it's like the
That's
person
a
has
good.
to eventually convince themselves that they need this product. You know,
Right.
and how do they convince themselves? That's why it's a personal approach. It's a personal touch. You can't sell basically watches to everyone, but for those that really want the watch, the relationship lasts forever,
True.
right?
Mm.
And they'll keep on going to your brand and buying watches from you. So it's not a mass kind of thing. It's basically very selected targeting to
Yeah.
the right consumer. That's how PR works.
Yep.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for the insights. Now, I want to bring up one question from Chiwa over here. Chiwa is asking, Chiwa actually asked a question that we already kind of like arranged,
About
but
to
then
ask one.
again, like
Yeah, we can jump.
Chiwa is asking, can you please share one of the stories of a major PR disaster incident of a client and how to salvage this? Of course,
Confirm
you don't need to
everybody
name
will be
them.
interested.
Okay. I'll share one recently. I can't mention names, of course, because
Sure.
I signed an NDA and all that. But I think the worst nightmare for a PR agency is if there's a death, lah. So
Mm,
if a client, for example, a death happens on their premises, right,
Mm.
right.
on their location or whatever, what do they do? And sometimes this can happen in the middle of the night. This can happen like at 2 a.m. and all that. And you get a call, right? And then you like, I need a holding statement. So a holding statement is basically the first statement that they need to give to the press, right? Because the press are going to be asking questions like, what did you
Absolutely.
know this, etc. What? And the holding statement has to be prepared so that number one, they don't give out too much information. Number two, that they don't implicate themselves, right? So that is just the first step, your holding statement. After that is basically controlling the negative news that comes out, right? So if there's any negative news, we have to inform the client. So we have to stay out and basically monitor the news for 24 hours, like how is the client implicated, why, and is it necessary to come up with a response to these articles, right? Now with social media, even you have to be even more on guard because people will give comments. So every time there's a new article that comes out, for example, it's also on social media, right? And then you have people that comments on that. So we have to monitor the comments as well to make sure that it doesn't damage the reputation of the client. And if it does, how do we prepare the right response? So there's a lot of background research, monitoring, etc. Uh, Having a press conference is more of a large scale kind of thing. that is if the brand is very big. Like for example, if you're SQ, SIA, or in a government sector or something, and then it's necessary to have a press conference, right? Where you see in movies, right? There's a press conference, and then journalists will ask questions, and then
Yeah.
the guy is like this, that, yeah. So that is a kind of a press conference. But most of the time, the key role of the PR agency, right, or the PR person, is to make sure that the news doesn't blow up. You have to basically calm down, make sure that it slowly dissolves, fades back into the background, and people start going back to their normal lives. How do you do that? Don't blow it up, right? Answer it privately. So if people have queries, you answer it privately. Sometimes it's a matter of just calling the journalist and say, hey, let's have a coffee, let's talk about this, you know, and how do we make sure that, we give them the story that they want so they don't blow it up. The worst thing you can do is basically give them give them superfluous answers, right? Like these sometimes a train breaks down and then you give them answers that don't answer their questions. Then the more they're gonna probe,
Yeah.
right? The more they're gonna ask questions. So don't do that. Yeah. So that is a PR fox lah.
Yeah.
Something I would dissuade any brand from doing. Please don't come up with inflated answers in your holding statement if they don't amount to anything. Because journalists are not stupid, right? They want the story. You got to give them what they want, and if you don't have the story, say that you'll get back to them.
Yeah, because the readers expect them to deliver some stories or basically
Exactly.
information. You see, but
Yeah.
but given that now social media is prevalent already,
Mm.
your job or basically the PR practitioner's job is like multiplied by like 1,000 times in
Oh
terms
yeah,
of
tell me about
complexity
it.
because
Uh-huh.
you don't have to wait for the newspaper to mention that case. For example, if somebody happens to pass by and snap a picture and it goes viral either on Twitter or whatever form, and all of a sudden you have like 1,000 not professional reporters asking questions and making assumptions and all those things while the house is burning.
Yeah.
Yep.
how
Yep.
how would how agile would you need your clients now? Because those days you can call a press conference. Nowadays, the press conference is called on social media whether you like it or not.
You
That's
probably
right.
have to go live, to answer certain things or something like that.
If it's serious enough, I mean, if it's
Yeah.
minor, then fine, you can still manage it. And most of the time, they are even faster. And newspapers now, what they do is they actually are monitoring social media because those are the source for them to get news.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, the key is you don't have to basically feed every troll that comes to you, lah.
Right.
Because a lot
Mm.
of them have their own agenda,
Of
right?
course.
A lot of them could be competitors, right? And a lot of them just want attention. So the key is, how we respond to queries online, right? We monitor the situation. We normally take it offline by PMing them, right? By private messaging them and saying, or if we have to give a general statement, thank you for your feedback. We will contact you directly and we'll address that. So that is basically taking them out of the whole conversation, right? So separation, right? It's like a virus, right? You basically separate the virus from the public, right?
Yep.
And then after that, you address the issue itself, and that's how you deal with a crisis, because that's how you identify the trolls from someone who's really having a crisis, and then you deal with those that matter. Yeah,
Right. Right.
You divide
Sure.
and conquer. Lah.
Yeah, Chiwai has
yeah.
a follow-up kind of like sharing.
All right.
He was saying that, speaking of that, like many years ago, there was an energizer run in Sepang Circuit, which is in Malaysia. And one of the runners didn't feel well, collapsed in one of the corners, and no one realized. He was
Yep.
heart attack and died. So it was a huge PR disaster in the events company, gone from the industry. Wow, that bad, no?
Wow.
It could be that bad, no? That's very interesting.
So
Yeah,
the to answer this question, it's not really a question, but I
it's not.
think on his mind, on GY's mind, right, is basically how can a company recover from a disaster like
That
that,
would be a good
right?
angle to look at this.
Right? Because like he mentioned that the company is pretty much gone, but it's not an end game for companies if something like that happens. It's a matter of how you basically answer to the public, right? The maddening crowd, right? In
Yep.
terms of how you planning to rectify the situation and prevent this from happening again. So if you answer from an honest perspective, an honest point of view, that you take full responsibility, for example, or you take some responsibility, explain the course of events. And I think many people, I would say the majority lah, let's just say 3/4 of people are rational people, right? And if they see that if someone died and and it's part of natural causes, they can't blame the company because these things tend to happen, right?
Yeah.
But as long as the company is proactive enough to say that they tried everything they could to revive him, etc., things were put in place. This thing had to happen. We're really sorry for the family. Life goes on. Well, don't say life goes on, but eventually all the company needs to say is that they did all they could, right, to prevent this from happening, and they will take further measures to prevent it from happening again. There's no reason why the company needs to close down after that, because the people, you have already won over the confidence from the public.
Yeah.
True. Yeah,
I think the blowout normally happens is when the statement or basically the announcement lacks empathy, especially if it's a
Absolutely.
crisis, and people,
Absolutely.
you just kind of brush it off. That it's not my problem, or he didn't. I mean, the victim or didn't look after himself or whatever it is. So when this sort of statement comes out, then then you have a massive blowout.
Yeah, and you can't blame the audience because it's disrespectful, right? It's
Yes,
disrespectful to the
absolutely.
family. It's disrespectful to the reader's intelligence. It's like, you think I'm stupid? You think I don't know what happened? So don't do that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest issue I find in many large companies, right? They tend to downplay the intelligence of their audience, and they tend to make them like seem like children, right?
Yeah.
You have a 3-year-old, you tell them
Yeah.
anything, right? They believe Santa Claus, yeah, okay, they believe.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
you don't do that to people because people are intelligent. You have to give them more credit. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So that's my take.
No, yeah,
That
probably they have to
doesn't work,
hire
man.
Wesley. That's a very important thing. So if you guys
They
have
can't
any
afford
issue,
me.
yeah. Oh yeah, true. Okay, thanks GY for all the sharing and all that. I probably want to bring us back to the normal screen. That's a very interesting
That's only question
discussion.
number one.
No, we
Only
actually
Wow,
question-
bring it on.
Oh, yo,
Only
yeah,
question
we,
number one,
we finished first question. That's not bad.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, bring us to the next question over here. Let's see. Now we talk about this. In fact, we talk about some example of the PR crisis that we have dealt with.
We discussed this.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I probably can jump on the next question that we have here, which is like, what do you think would be a big, most difficult challenges when it comes
Oh,
to
yes.
handling PR? This is
Okay.
good.
The most difficult challenge to me is basically explaining to people what PR is. I think
Oh,
that
yeah.
I've been in this industry for 18 years. Until now, I think many people who are in marketing, mind you, people that are managers, directors, CMOs, right? They still don't understand the limitations of PR. Yeah, they understand PR, but they don't understand the limitations.
Limitation.
Yeah, in the sense that their expectations are quite incredulous. Like they say, I want the front page of, in this paper, you make sure you get it. But they
Yeah.
don't understand that PR people don't own the media. We don't.
No way.
If I did own the media, I'd be paid much, much more, right? I mean, seriously, right? If the editor was my friend or what, right? I have copy with him. Yeah, okay, just put this story on
No,
page
if you
one.
own the media, you won't be doing PR work already.
Exactly, I wouldn't be doing PR, man. Yeah, so that's what they don't seem to understand, right?
Yeah.
So there has to be a give and take. Or sometimes they'll ask question like, if their story is featured in the press, they'll say like, why am I mentioned with so many other brands? Why is the story so small?
Right.
But
Yes.
Why
but
my picture is so small?
why is my picture so small? But that's not the point. The point here is that they have mentioned you, right? And for them to mention you amidst all your other competitors, which could be 100 or so, is actually very good for your own personal profile, for your own branding, And why it is better than a full page ad in the newspaper? Because it's credible. Because you didn't pay anyone to write it.
Yeah.
They did it out of their own free will. You
Yeah.
see? So it's a matter of helping them understand that public relations is maintaining a long-term relationship. It's not a short-term thing. For advertising, you pay money straight away, they come out. Yeah, okay. It's a one-off thing, right? But for PR, you got to maintain that relationship. In the end, you want the media to come to you for stories, right? If they need a spokesperson for a certain story, then you don't have to pitch. They'll come to you. That makes your job easier. So that is the most difficult challenge I face. I think it's basically explaining the limitations, explaining the job scope, explaining the value that a PR agency brings to the table, because many of them don't see the value of PR. I think you know, like you mentioned earlier, Andrew, that earlier you said you went to some clients before and they're like, why hire a PR agency, right?
Yep.
Yeah, the value of a PR agency is that you are actually protecting your brand. It's like insurance policy. Yeah, anything happens with your brand, right? You have the PR agency to basically pick up the pieces for you. So that is the value of a PR agency.
I would expect the challenge would be coaching your clients to actually be PR friendly as opposed to as opposed to having you to hold that magic wand to make bad story goes away and all those things. Wouldn't be coaching the clients for them to be aware is a challenge?
Well, to be honest, I've never come across clients that don't want to be friendly. It's just that they are very scared. Yeah, they're very scared
Ah,
of the media. They're
right.
not like they're not abrasive. They're like afraid that if they say anything, the media is going to suddenly pick it up and just publish it straight away. So they're like overly
Ah,
cautious. But then at the same time, you have clients that are not cautious at all, and they just say anything that comes to mind, and then you have to kick them under the table and say, hey, don't say that. No, hey, let me
yes.
go toilet for a while, let me talk to you. So sometimes it's a matter of balance, right? It's a matter of basically trying to guide them and helping them understand what to do and what not to do. And after a while, they get the hang of it. Yeah, it's just taking
Ah,
them under your wing and explaining to them. Yeah.
all right.
I
So
do
can I
know.
safely,
Awesome.
yeah, and Manfred,
I do know some CEOs are the so media shy. The LinkedIn profile is empty face one. CEO leh.
Oh yeah,
That's a
yeah,
no-no.
Quite
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
leh.
Maybe they
yeah,
want to be mysterious, lah. They want to be Batman or what. I don't know, right? Yeah.
yeah.
no
No,
Batman in.
a lot of them want to be behind the scene. They don't want
Yeah.
to show up, and
When you want
it
to raise
doesn't work
funds, that will be a
nowadays.
different story already lah.
But I think actually that happens. I think this is really like kind of like I would say sometimes you have some self-limiting kind of thoughts over there because when I was running my agency, right, I also don't want to come up front. I also don't want to be seen. I know. I mean, not until 2020 I started building my YouTube channel and all that, and everything becomes come like I am everywhere. But
Yeah.
I believe Wesley has a very good point, which is if it's guided, then they should be very comfortable. And then that will lead me to the next question that I have. Can I safely say that PR contracts are usually for long term?
Yes
As
and
in either
no.
engagement with agency.
Uh, the engaged agency media context or the engaged agency?
I mean, like let's say if any company works with you, right?
Yeah.
Their engagement with you should be long term, right?
Oh yes, definitely. I
They
think
don't want to keep changing, right?
yeah, I think it doesn't make sense for the company to basically have a PR agency for short-term basis because to actually regurgitate and to vomit out your whole brand story to one agency and for them to sell it, it can be quite tiring, right? If you do that every
Very.
year or every 6 months, right? They
Yep.
have to tell their whole story, life story, grandfather story again and again and again. And then
Yes.
after that, the other agency may misinterpret it in another way. And then, so it's a matter of just sticking to one agency for at least 1 to 2 years, right? Because sometimes in the initial few months there'll be some hiccups, right? But you need to give it some time because PR is a slow burn, right? You cannot suddenly see news coverage in the next day. It'll take 1 to 2 months before you see the trend pick up, and then after that it will stabilize, right? And then you come up with new stories, and then it'll pick up again. So it's like that, right? It's like a kind of the EKG machine, right, for your heart,
Yep.
right? It's a bit like that, ups and downs, right? It cannot just go up all the way. That doesn't make sense, lah.
Yep.
No advertising spend, no media spend will make your brand just go skyrocket unless you're Amazon or something.
If
Yeah.
life is so
So
easy, lah. If life
if
was so
only life, if
easy.
only I was at
Yes.
Amazon, lah. Yeah.
Right.
So you see, that's how normally it works, lah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Right.
Because for digital marketing or so-called maybe marketing advertising agency, usually they change more often. Because it's a lot easier to change agency because when I
Yeah.
was running my digital agency back then, right, we
Yep.
were invited for pitches like, quite often, even from the same company. So I think that's kind of like, that's why I want to say, quickly angle this and that so-called the discussion towards our next question, which is, in my opinion, I'm just thinking out loud, right? In a way, based on whatever you're saying, I think if you want to start an agency, it's better to start a PR agency because it kind of like gives you kind of longer term contract. and you may not have that much trouble of like probably the client said they want to change agency, they want to open up a pitch again every like 6 months or a year. It could be that short, 6 months to a year for advertising side of it. That's why I want to bring us up to another question, which is the next one. How can, let's say, a complete newcomer want to get started in this industry? How do they start?
I may be biased when I answer this question, but I
Yeah.
always tell people, right, that join an agency because you learn the most kind of things when you work in a PR agency, because you have to be basically everything. You have to be
Oh,
able to
yes.
write, you have to be able to deal with the media, and you have to be able to deal with clients. So you're basically thrown in the deep end. You have to do everything compared to in-house lah. In-house, is a bit of a easier role because you wait for the media to come to you. You don't have to actively pitch stories to them. But for an agency, you're basically doing everything. Then you have to deal with difficult clients. You have to deal with difficult journalists. Then it's basically the information overload is there. But after you work in an agency, you have your hands and feet firmly grounded in what PR is about. Yeah.
Good point.
So yeah, I had my first baptism of fire in an agency itself, right? To be honest, I hated it. I was always shouted at, and this was before social media. When I joined PR, there was no such thing as Facebook and all that. It was very
Those were
Years
the
back.
good days.
Oh, no.
Those were the
yeah,
good days.
bosses throw chairs at you and all that. Now no such thing. Now it's like you call MOM already. so yeah, times were different but you learn more, because you're always on your toes. Yeah.
Where,
Cool.
where got called MOM? You just pick up the phone and then turn on your
Oh,
camera,
that's
record,
true.
and
Yeah,
that's
Go
it.
live, that's like
Yeah.
my boss throw chair. See that?
Now we go live.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay, we have a question from Melissa on Facebook. I think I just want to quickly bring this up, right?
Yeah.
And we're just going to rearrange the face a little bit now. Melissa is asking, she said, since you mentioned that some clients have ridiculous expectation, in your opinion, what would be a good measure or reasonable KPI for company to use to evaluate that PR is working for them? That's a very good question. Thank
That
you,
is
Melissa.
It is a
good
good
question, Melissa.
Very good
That
question,
is
Melissa.
Very
Yes.
good.
Yeah, I think number one, it would be how people are speaking about it on social media. So this is where your social media management has a part to play with it, right? So coverage is one thing, right, in terms of the news, but you also need to monitor in terms of your overall social media channels. What is the engagement like? Are people talking about it? And also, lastly, if it depends on what kind of industry you're in, how does it affect in a way your retail sales? Are people discussing it? So it's all a matter of word of mouth. But like I mentioned earlier, these kind of measurements cannot be done overnight. It cannot be done within like 1 month or two because it's not very accurate. It has to be measured over at least 6 months. Then at least you can see the value of these constant stories going out to the press, working with influencers. How did that add value to your company? And you will see it. You definitely will see it. Because if your brand is being seen and picked up by different sources, right, whether it's social media channels, whether it's your mainstream media, people are going to talk about you, right? And there are different ways how you can get that word of mouth across. So it's not just purely about numbers. It's a matter of analyzing how the entire media scene is basically taking the news, right, and how it is positive to your brand.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty challenging to actually track. I mean, basically
is.
pinpoint. I mean, when we run ads, we have this attribution, and even then also when we run ads, sometimes certain customers say, yeah, because my brand is famous, so if I run ads, also if I don't run ads, I'll still get sales, or either it could be sales because of my emails and not because of your ads and all those things. Even with those which is measurable, already has an issue. But for PR, what do you refer? You look at stuff like brand recalls, or you look at number of articles that was featured in a month, in a week, in a year.
Sentiment.
If I may add anything, because when I was running my agency back then, we were always approached by all these so-called social media monitoring tools. Some crazy high-level monitoring tools can go down to the very, very high level. They can go very precise on even the sentiment. They will give you the percentage of positive sentiment and negative sentiment, and they will give you that kind of report. They track across the web on all platform, and they kind of like, in a way, they have this AI running at the back to kind of gauge whether is this a positive remark or a negative remark. And then they will
Right.
add your number. Then basically, you know, you will get kind of like a sentiment movement. You know, like
just
maybe
to add, most of
yeah.
the time is neutral sentiment. As in the remark itself is neutral. So most of small number is positive, negative, unless something bad happened.
But on the other hand, you can also look at the number of mentions, because all these, if you talk about that, right? Compared, I think I'm not sure whether Wesley would agree. Compared to last time, a lot of things are not measurable. But when everything goes digital, everything is trackable. You can know, like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah,
now
that's
1 month, instead of 100 comments on your brand, now we have 1,000 comments on your brand. So that's a growth.
Yeah, I think this is where we are at the forefront of how PR is evolving lah, and change, because data analytics, right, as what you mentioned, Jason, is going to be the next big thing when it comes to PR, right? How is it measurable? And that is where digital marketing and PR work hand in hand, you know, because PR is basically, it's more like you are a gatekeeper in terms of your brand image, right? In terms of your messages, are they followed through, your objectives, etc. And in terms of how you measure how they go out to the public. So you can say something about yourself, right? But how a person perceives what you say is a different thing,
Very
right?
true.
So
Very true.
so it's perception at the end of the day, right? So you can sell your product as much as you want, but at the end of the day, if your audience doesn't perceive it in the right way as you want them to perceive it, then you may need to change your strategy. That is why you always need to basically, you might need to change your strategy during certain periods, like after 6 months, you measure your success. That's where you use your digital marketing tools, you track your sales, etc., and you see whether you need to change your strategy. So sometimes your messages need to be changed, which is PR, right? How you basically output that, whether maybe you need to change your creative strategy, need to change your target audience, maybe you need to change your channels, that you're reaching out to. But it's a constant evolving process. It is fluid. Fluidity is very important when it comes to PR. You can't basically use the same kind of story all the time, because let's face it, the world is evolving, things change, news changes all the time. You have to go
Yeah.
with the times. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's how brands have to evolve.
I think that
And
also
sentiments change as well.
correct. I
Yeah,
mean, in a
exactly.
way, that's the way I understand this is like, when it comes to marketing, inside marketing, there are so many elements like digital advertising, marketing, creative, and all that. PR seems to be the most kind of like
Has
kind of
has
like
PR gone digital?
irreplaceable field.
Yeah.
PR is always digital because of the social media, because it just follows
Yeah, the channels that they work
the
with. Okay.
channels. So, but then again, I think PR seems to be the most because everything can be replaced by AI right now, running ads and all that. But I think PR can't. You need
Well,
to
it
have a
can't.
human brain at the back of it.
Exactly. I think there was someone, I think I had sometime back, a few years back, I think I had a bit of a argument with him online, right? These forums, right? And he wanted to set up a kind of a AI, PR AI kind of ad or something,
Right.
which had to do with churning out press releases. So
Okay.
my argument was, PR is not about press releases.
Yeah.
It's not just about blasting out press releases. It's more than that. You can't basically automate a brain, right, to think
Yeah.
from a strategic point of view.
Correct.
And yeah, so that's my point. Many people tend to perceive PR as a press release, right? It's just blasting out press releases like flyers. You're going to Orchard
Right.
and blasting
Right.
out in people's faces.
Right.
That's not PR.
Yes.
I keep telling clients that no matter how many press releases you send out a month, it doesn't guarantee more coverage for your brand.
Very
you
true.
know yeah, but some of them have this perception that
Yeah.
that the only way to get publicity is through a press release. It's not.
That's why these people are not real PR people, That's why they only understand
Uh,
a fraction of the entire PR. Then probably they need to go over
Yeah.
to your firm and actually to your agency to learn from
Absolutely.
you a little bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, because just
That's a
now
good tell.
when we were talking about slow burn, right? I kind of
Mm.
related it to something similar, which is, in my opinion, it may sound similar to SEO, which is also a
Mm.
slow burn, where it will take some time to see some results. But now the way I look at it, I think it's not the same, because SEO can still be controlled in a way, very much.
Yes, you're
You
right.
have control, but PR, no, you can't really control how human think, right?
You
And
can't.
even though how much you churn this whole thing, you may not be able to just anchor everybody's way of thinking towards the way that you want it.
It's perception management.
Yeah, well,
Correct. You can't control it, but you can try and identify trends and patterns in
Right.
thought processes and how
Yep.
the media is talking about something. So, for example, right? If I have a client and I know that suddenly, media is suddenly talking a lot about sustainability, which is why media monitoring is very important. And there's a
Okay.
lot of sustainability news, environment. So I have to find an environment sustainability angle for my client, whether it's a F&B client, whether it's a financial client, whether it's an e-commerce client, guys, let's discuss what is your sustainability angle, or maybe there's a CSR, corporate social responsibility angle, because
Yep.
that's being picked up by certain news. So it's about monitoring trends, right? And how do you ride on that trend to get your client on the news?
Wow, the sensitivity is damn crazy, man. I don't think this
You
is
got to
easy.
be aware. Yeah, you got to be
Yeah.
aware of shit.
But
Yeah.
there are
Awareness
definitely some
level.
trends that you should not ride on, right? Yeah,
Oh
certain.
yes.
So,
Your
example, what are trends that you should not ride on?
TikTok trends. So I think TikTok trends are a bit too fast for the PR industry. Like swallowing Tide Pods is something that you don't want to tell your clients about. So, but I think, yeah, with the kids nowadays, right? I think the trends are evolving so much for such a young audience that they don't even know what they want. So I think it is the responsibility for brands to basically go out there and tell them what they should have in that sense. Because if they keep changing their mind every day about certain things, you can't do that. No brand can do that, right? Because it takes a lot of work for creativity. It takes a lot of work to come up with campaigns and all that. So
Oh
you
yes.
need to be at the forefront of this. You need to set the trend, right? When it comes to that, and then people will follow you. You need to be another Louis Vuitton, or you need to be another, I don't know, Dom Perignon, right? Which is timeless, or another Mercedes Benz or BMW. You don't need to keep changing all the time to suit the audience. Sometimes you need to set your own trend. Yeah. But that
Nice.
comes with confidence, lah, and that comes with over time, lah,
Yeah.
like
It's
your brand.
understanding of
Yeah,
positioning and also the message that you consistently put up.
exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Melissa said, makes sense. Thank you. Thanks for
Awesome.
the
Thanks,
question,
Malaysia, for the questions.
Melissa. And let's bring back to this one now. Okay. Wow. That's a very, in fact, learn a lot. Great discussion up to now. Seriously,
Yep.
we learned a lot. Now, I just want to select one question that I can probably just lead this discussion. I would jump the question a little bit, Wesley. Can I? I want to
No problem.
go for
No
this
problem. Yeah.
question. I think this is quite interesting. Can social media take the role of traditional media, which is what we are discussing just now, right, at the backstage before we started? What is social
Okay.
media doing? Yeah, please.
Social media, right, I think is a great evolution when it comes to media because it gives real-time updates, number one. And it also gives the perception of what is happening from a common man. It's like strapping a GoPro on someone and seeing the from his eyes how his view on life is. However, uh, you can't tell whether it's real or not, right? And if the public is actually depending on so many sources, they're going to be very confused of what is real and what is not because perceptions, each one of us have our own perception, right? We can look at a ball and each one of us can see a ball differently. And
Yep.
the same goes with influencers and with different kinds of social media people. So it cannot take over traditional media. That is my opinion. Traditional media will always be there because eventually traditional media has to give that bipartisan view on what news is. They have to give, a good news outlet, lah. They have to give one point of view or multiple points of view, not just from the person's eyes alone, right? But it is actually very good. It's an eye opener for many people that want to see a different side of the coin now,
Yeah.
So for example, if they are reading news about a war in a certain country, then they'll just go on Twitter feeds and then they'll search on, what are people talking about in that country to give them a better perception, whether it's true or not, what the news channel is reporting. So that is how social media and mainstream news can work together, but it cannot work independently. Yeah. There needs to be a blend.
Yeah.
So there's
But
no such thing as taking over or no. I think it's
No,
more
it's
like
not going
blending
to take over.
together. Yeah,
That's
because
right.
eventually it shouldn't be just digital media or conventional media. At the end of the day, everything will converge as media.
You're right. It's just going to be okay. How I see media is content, right? How I see that content has evolved, it's basically through different mediums, right? Content has not really changed, like the word, how you style your sentences, how you basically say certain things. The message is there, the meaning is there, I mean, right? But the way how it is portrayed, how it is said, will have to differ based on the medium. So with video content, with different social media content, with long form, short form, I can go on. It's the meaning has to be there, right? And I think that's where traditional media comes in. That is the bonus point of traditional media, because as far as I know, for traditional media, most of the time, all of them are 80%, their meaning is there. Lah. So if a bomb happens in this country, they'll report a bomb happens in this country, right? But when it comes to some of these other kind of news, like social media channels, they'll say no bomb happened, right? And then that brings to question like what is real and what is not. Yeah. So that is why traditional media sources will always be very important. And I think that it should be institutionalized lah, for a very long time.
I think
Nice.
there is also this for traditional media. There's still this halo effect, primarily because of the legacy. The second thing is because of the curation. I mean, for example, I recently have just been looking into articles on NFTs. For example, if there is an explainer on NFT, would you believe an article that is from the Economist as opposed to a blog post called the Finance Today, for example? Which one would you probably, kind of believe more?
That's a very good question, because what I would do is I would find out who are the people funding the economists, right? Like they would have their own agenda to basically
Yes.
maybe talk about cryptocurrency is bad because maybe a lot the people funding the
The
economists,
banks,
I'm just saying, hypothetically, I'm not saying anything about the
Very
economists,
true.
okay? Yeah, they could maybe be the ones being funded by banks, traditional banks. So they have to say something bad about cryptocurrency. So, it's all about digging and finding out and researching about who are the people paying these media companies, who are their paymasters, because that affects the narrative of the story at the end of the day.
Nice. That's what very good angle talking about NFT, right? So much of all these things.
It's a
All right,
lot,
I mean,
yeah.
seriously, I think that would
Yeah.
actually kind of like wrap up our discussion tonight. Seriously,
Well, that was fast.
already like
We
almost
just
1
got
hour.
I know.
started.
Yeah, it's
Right.
it's very
Do
it's
this
very
again.
insightful. Seriously, it's very insightful. This
Thank
is one
you.
of the best explanation that I got about
yes.
PR, to be very frank.
Oh, thank you
in
very
many
much.
many years. So that if you guys, any one of you needs help, right? I just want to quickly bring this up again. If you want to connect with Wesley, you can actually go over and talk to him on LinkedIn. And I was just talking to him just now, right? In fact, he does some training and coaching as well. So if you guys need some help, but of course,
yes.
if you need PR help, then definitely up to now, after 1 hour watching or listening to him and on his insights and all that, he's really the right person and the best person that you can actually talk to and work with in order to bring
Especially if you're a business owner.
Yeah,
You
and
should
bring
seak out Wesley.
Correct. Of course, he said maybe very expensive, but then again, worth it. Okay, worth it.
This is the attention economy.
Yeah,
whether
this
like
is
it
what
or
you
not.
get, right? So, guys, Manfred, are we gonna bring up for the website of the week?
Wesley's supposed to cover.
Wesley, you want to bring this up? You can.
Okay.
I'm just
share
gonna
my screen.
go over and
Let me
copy
share my
this.
screen.
Yeah, Wesley is gonna share with us some monitoring tool, right? Or
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me see.
Just
Okay,
let-
so
we need to bring it up.
can you see it
You need to
on
select
the
the screen first. I'm not seeing the screen. Oh yeah,
Oh,
there you
okay.
go.
It's
It's up.
showing.
It's up.
Okay.
It's up. It's up.
So,
It's up.
this particular website, I mean, is called Telemedia. This is a website many PR agencies use for a database of journalists. If you basically want to know, which journalists are in which publication and around which country, like around
Nice.
Southeast Asia, you can refer to this, and the database is updated on a regular basis. So this is a great resource for people within the PR industry, whether it's in comms, etc. Because knowing your media is your bread and butter, lah. Yeah, and that's something that all PR consultants need to know. Yeah,
Okay, awesome. So this is a paid software or what? Telemedia?
it is paid.
I think
It is paid.
it has to be
Yeah.
paid because these are
Subscribe.
very
Yeah.
very expensive
It looks like
database.
something very useful, but then again, expensive. Anything useful is expensive. It's totally
Definitely.
that way, you know. Like, yeah.
Definitely.
So, guys, I just put the link in both Facebook and YouTube, so you guys can actually go over and grab it and
Telemedia.
go over and telemedia. It's quite interesting. So that, you know, really brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. For those who are still here with us, and thank you so much, Wesley.
Get connected, Wesley.
For this
on LinkedIn.
crazy, insightful, so-called session that, you know, I personally learned a great deal from this one.
Oh, yes.
Definitely. If you guys,
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun. Seriously, you
yeah,
guys.
man. Yeah, man. And if any one of you needs help convincing your boss about the importance of PR, bring them to this episode.
Yeah.
You know the drill. You can actually get it on YouTube, and of course, it will be available on other so-called like the podcasts on Apple or podcast, iTunes, and Spotify as well. So everything will be available. So remember, guys, this is what we do every. Yeah, sorry, you're saying?
Yes, and also as a pro tip, reach out to Wesley first before crisis happens. If it happens and it becomes too late. Yes.
Yeah. That's the right thing to do. So the link is already there. Okay, so guys, here's the drill. If you're listening to the podcast, remember to go back to the YouTube channel to get all the links that we mentioned over here in the video itself. So, all right, guys, that's kind of like brings us to the wrap. Thank you so much. And we do this every Wednesday night. This is the Tree Marketeers Show. I'm Jason. We have Manfred and Andrew, and of course our guest Wesley here.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll see you next week, same time
guys.
on Wednesday night. Thank you so much, guys. Good night.
Good night.